Catherine Grayson, welcome into Melbourne.
Well, thank you very much. I never did do the Eddie Cantor show.
Didn't you?
Didn't
No,
you?
not ever. No, I was studying for Grand Opera, and Eddie Cantor did hear of me, and I was already signed to RCA Red Seal Records, so I couldn't. They didn't want me to be a second Deanna Durbin. That's why I couldn't go on the Eddie Cantor show.
Goodness. Well, the
But
reports then...
he did ask me, and he was a darling, sweet man.
Yes.
His people, Dick Knight and Walter Schumann, his musical director, they were wonderful to me. But MGM also heard about me, and RCA would let me go on. As I said, they didn't want me to be a second Deanna, so they said it wouldn't hurt to go out and talk to MGM. So my voice teacher and I went out, and they had me singing the Grand Opera and the Jeanette songs and the Judy songs and the Deanna songs and all the latest pop music. And the studio sent a limousine for my mother and father, and they came, and I was under contract before I left that day.
How old were you when you started singing?
For singing, I sang all my life.
Did you really?
Really?
I had two older brothers and a younger sister, and our whole family sang. And we sang, oddly enough, with Red Seal RCA Records, with the old wind-up Victrola.
Yeah.
Yes. See, that goes
we
back...
had beautiful music all our lives, which made the difficult times and the wonderful times even more wonderful.
It sounds like your parents are very supportive, Catherine.
Yes, but they weren't. I didn't have a stage mother. She never went with me to the studio. My teacher, Mary McDonald, who taught at the Little Red Schoolhouse there, was my mother there.
Well, during your time, you've certainly made some wonderful movies, and a lot of those musicals, of course, stick out through MGM. There was Anchors Away with Frank Sinatra, Gene Kelly. So many of them. Ziegfeld Follies, we've got Showboat, The Desert Song, Kiss Me Kate, you name them, and you were there.
Yes, well, I had a wonderful good fortune. I think God was looking out for me, and He still is looking out for me. So I enjoyed each one. That studio was the studio of the world, and it was the greatest studio. Each day's work was like heaven.
Yes.
We worked 6 days a week, and we worked from 12 to 14 hours a day. But with the loving, kind people that I worked with, the crew and the cast and all the people were so wonderful that it made the day go quickly and beautifully.
What was it like working with Abbott and Costello back in 1942 on Rio Rita?
Lou Costello was one of the sweetest people. He was so much fun. Bud Abbott liked to play gin rummy with some of the crew people.
Yes.
He liked to play. He liked to gamble. So, but Lou was very sweet with all the young people.
And of course, you played opposite Howard Keel in just so many musicals. What was it like working with a man like that?
Oh well, Howard was my brother's roommate in New York before I ever met him. And they used to call me on the phone, and they said that some fellow had just broken my record at the Capitol Theater. And I said, oh. And as it turned out, Harry, my brother's roommate, turned out to be Howard Keel, my leading man. And the fellow that broke my record at the Capitol Theater became my husband, Johnny Johnston.
And of course, you've been to Australia many times too over the years, haven't you? I think more recently with Van Johnson, from memory.
Well, I've worked a lot with Van, yes. Well, we did Grounds for Marriage together at the studio. It was a fun picture. It isn't out on video yet.
Those great days of the musicals, of course, were about to end around 1956 because people wanted a more relaxed style of singing or musicals, if I remember correctly. You went on, though, from then, didn't you, to star then on stage, and, of course, it went into Camelot.
Yes, well, I did The Merry Widow, I did Rosalinda, and then I did opera, too. I did De Fledermaus, which was Rosalinda, really, and Traviata, La Boheme, Madame Butterfly. I did, the last one I did was Orpheus in the Underworld for Sarah Caldwell at the Boston Opera. Then we took that on tour.
So, Catherine, your training was in classical music then?
I beg your pardon?
Your training was in classical music.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes, but we listened to the radio. We imitated everybody on radio when we were children.
Is that what it was? Yes.
And, that's why if you see a picture called So This Is Love, the story of Grace Moore.
And Catherine, what are you doing these days? Other movies coming up for you?
I was asked to do a movie, but they wanted me to play a witch, but they had some dirty words in it, and I said no.
Good on you.
I didn't want to do it.
No, well, it's nice to be selective.
It could be fun, and they didn't need those words. They could have used other words.
I think the movies have changed, haven't they? And I think a lot of the language is just not required.
I see most of my fan mail come from the young people.
Yes.
And they don't particularly like the ugliness.
No.
They like the beauty of the old. And you know something? They're so aware of lighting and backgrounds and sets and costumes. And they're so aware of so many things. I'm so proud of them for being so wise and so keen on what they see.
There's been a number of changes in cinema over the years. What are the greatest changes you have noticed since those early days?
Well, of course, we had the great opportunity of having a studio behind us. We had where they had craftsmen from all over the world that could build a set. You would go from one set, you would come back on a brand new set in the morning, and perfectly done by great craftsmen from all over the world. Knowledgeable, wonderful people who could use their hands and make beautiful things.
If you had your time over again, Catherine, would you change anything?
We had always had young people coming up.
Mm.
We had they had the great stars, and we had, for instance, when I walked on, there were all the Barrymores. There was Jeanette MacDonald and Clark Gable and Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy, Garbo and Greer Garson and Walter Pidgeon, all those great stars. And then they had younger stars like Lana and Mickey and Judy, and the rest of us coming up, you know.
Catherine, if you had your time over again, would you change anything?
Well, when I started out to sing an opera. But operas are quite a small world. And speaking of opera, Joan Sutherland is having her book as she's coming. She will be, and I'm going to surprise her.
Mm.
Because I'm going to be there with Belzond when she signs her books.
Right.
I'm going to buy tons of them. Give gifts to my friends who adore her. She's very loved here in this country too.
She's a great artist.
She's not only a great artist, she's a great human being.
Yes, and a lovely ambassador. She certainly is.
We love her here, I guess as much as you love her there.
Yeah, we certainly do.
Yeah.
Catherine Grayson, it's been a delight to talk to you in our program. We must thank you very, very much, and let's hope we see you back on the screen in the near future.
Thank you.
Catherine Grayson, our special guest tonight.